You know the type. They walk into a restaurant and beeline for the seat facing the door. They've got a mental backup plan for a plan that doesn't even need one. On the surface, it reads as a quirk, maybe a little intense. Underneath, it's a nervous system that learned somewhere along the way that safety was never guaranteed, so it built a permanent lookout post just in case. Psychologists have a name for it, hypervigilance, but that clinical word doesn't quite capture what it feels like from the inside. It's not paranoia. It's closer to a smoke detector that got triggered once too often, and now checks the air constantly, even in rooms that are perfectly safe. Here's what's strange though. That same wiring that never fully switches off also makes these people some of the most tuned-in humans you'll ever meet. They catch a flicker in your voice before you finish the sentence. They notice the smile that doesn't reach the eyes. They've had so much practice reading a room for danger that reading a room for feelings became second nature too. Most people walk into a space and see furniture. They walk in and clock the emotional weather before they've even sat down. There's actual research behind why this happens. Psychologist Tedeschi, who helped define the concept, found that a significant share of people who go through serious hardship don't just recover. They grow past where they started. Relationships get deeper. Priorities get sharper. A decent sunset can wreck them in the best way, and they've stopped being embarrassed about it. Researchers call this post-traumatic growth, and it's one of the more hopeful findings in trauma psychology. But growth doesn't erase the harder parts. Ask someone like this how they're doing, and you'll usually get some version of, "I'm fine." Honestly, it's not a big deal. It's not modesty. It's a habit built from having survived by minimizing. If you convinced yourself the wound wasn't that deep, you could keep walking. Admitting the depth, even years later, can feel like undoing all that work. Then there's the humor. Sharp, a little dark, always ready. It's easy to mistake it for not taking things seriously. It's the opposite. Laughing at the absurdity of your own worst moments is a way of taking the power back from them. If you can joke about it, it doesn't own you anymore. Every dark joke is a small act of defiance against whatever tried to flatten them. Relationships bring out the strangest contradiction of all. These are often the most loyal people you'll ever have in your corner. Call at 3 a.m. and they'll pick up, but ask them to actually need you back, and watch them suddenly get very busy. It's not that they don't want closeness. It's that somewhere in their history, closeness came with a cost, so their body learned to brace the moment someone gets near instead of relax. Wanting connection and fearing dependence can live in the same person at the same time, which is exactly as exhausting as it sounds. The same split shows up around control. Watch someone like this agonize over which mug to use for their coffee, then shrug off genuinely enormous uncertainty about their career or their future with total calm. It looks backwards until you realize the logic. The big stuff was never in their hands to begin with, so there's no point fighting it. The small stuff is one of the few places they actually get a say, so it matters more than it should. They're full of these contradictions, honestly. Tough and soft at the same time. Guarded with strangers, wide open with the right person. Hopeful about people in general while expecting the worst from any one situation. They've learned, the hard way, that two opposite things can both be true at once. Underneath all of it, though, there's something quieter that almost never gets talked about. Grief, not for a person they lost, but for a version of themselves they lost. The version who trusted people without doing a background check first. The version who laughed without scanning the room. The version who didn't rehearse conversations in the shower or brace for bad news every time the phone buzzed. They miss someone they can barely remember being, and there's no real way to explain that kind of homesickness to someone who's never felt it. That grief doesn't break them, though. If anything, it's what shapes the rest of it. It's why they notice things other people miss. It's why peace, real ordinary peace, means more to them than it does to most. It's why they can spot a safe person from across a room, because they know exactly what it costs them to learn what an unsafe one looks like. Maybe that's the real takeaway here. Getting through something enormous doesn't just leave a scar. Over time, for a lot of people, it becomes a kind of fluency. They understand things about fear, about safety, about what people actually need in hard moments, that you can't learn any other way. Their strength was never about staying unbroken. It's that they know how to put themselves back together, even when some of the pieces land in a slightly different place than before. Think of an old tree that's made it through more than a few bad winters. It's not smooth. It's got rings that show exactly where the hard years were, but it's still standing, and it's sturdier for having bent instead of snapped. So the next time you meet someone who seems a little too unbothered by chaos, a little too quick to laugh at their own worst moments, a little too calm in a crisis, that's not nothing. That's not luck either. That's someone who went through more than most people ever will and somehow kept showing up anyway. That's not just psychology. That's what surviving well actually looks like.